On a short week, we get one more with Carson Wentz. And with any luck, that's the last one. But as with all things, it's questionable. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to my hashtag everydayers for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Today on the show, jam-packed show. There's a ton that we need to talk about, from J.J. McCarthy once again getting relegated to emergency third QB on a short week. There are some odds and ends from the Eagles game, especially one particular question about the defense that I want to answer and how that sort of plays into the upcoming Chargers game. But this is the last solo show before the Vikings and Chargers play. Tomorrow will be the crossover with Locked On Chargers, which should be a much more comprehensive preview of the game that you can listen to at some point on Thursday, if you can get to it before kickoff. And then, of course, Friday we'll be recapping that game. So there's a lot. We're kind of combining what's usually the Wednesday show and the Friday show. But what we have to start with today is the news that Carson Wentz will be starting again. So if you're a Chargers fan listening and you're wondering who the quarterback is, there's your answer. It's Carson Wentz. They put J.J. McCarthy through a workout. Wasn't quite there, I think, was the wording that Kevin O'Connell used. And so he will once again be the emergency third QB. Max Brosmer's the backup. Carson Wentz is the starter. That reminds me, because that had a lot of the bold predictions had to do with that. We will do those later in the show as well. The bold predictions and, of course, the Zoever under. But there are a couple of things that I would like to address that I've seen and heard a lot of people talking about, asking about, with the way that O'Connell has talked about this whole situation. So on the squad show on Monday, Sam Ekstrom, who's been beating this drum all year, is really annoyed with the way that Kevin O'Connell's talked about this, because first it was he's going to be out a couple weeks. Maybe he could play against the Steelers. Maybe he could play against the Browns. Then it was, well, it's going to be after the bye. Now it's 2 whole games after the bye, and now it's supposed to be 6. It went from 2 weeks to 4 weeks to 6 weeks, and he's going, well, what's to stop it from going to 8 weeks to 10 weeks? It's a season ender. I want to caution you from that slippery slope of sorts. And so there is somebody on Twitter who goes by Skoldoc. I believe this is the same Skoldoc that I've gotten an email from every once in a while, who's a literal podiatrist, a foot doctor. The man knows ankles, and who was posting about, essentially that it was always a pipe dream to think that J.J. McCarthy would be out of a high ankle sprain after 2 weeks. And quarterbacks who do play after 2 weeks are probably just playing through it, and you're just not worried if they're losing mobility. It's just still worth it because you just don't trust your backup or whatever. And so with a young quarterback that was struggling anyways, that's not really the situation we're in. So they're perfectly content to let him go get healthy and go 2-2 with their backup, right? Go 500 with the backup. And they'll either be 3-2 or 2-3 with him, assuming that Tom Pelissero was right about it being the Lions game. But it's super important that Kevin O'Connell said, hey, if this were a Sunday game, things might be different. That's telling us he's going to play next week, to me. That is as much as Kevin O'Connell can. And the thing about O'Connell is he never says anything surely, right? Do you remember that all that consternation in the offseason about how they haven't named J.J. McCarthy the starter? And he was like, why would I name J.J. McCarthy the starter? And everyone was kind of like, because we're not sure if you want him to start. And he just never said it and just sort of quietly trotted J.J. McCarthy out there as QB1 to start the season. He just never says it. And he's not saying it again, but that doesn't mean it's not happening, just like it didn't mean that last time. Last time, it was pretty obvious that J.J. McCarthy was QB1. We didn't need verbal confirmation, and we don't need it again. It sounds to me, in the way that Kevin O'Connell has talked about all of this, that he's not saying, well, if this were different, maybe J.J. McCarthy would suit up and be able to back up Wentz. They're not making that decision. And this is something that maybe I'm just too enveloped in my own circle of people that I do shows with, that are like Sam and Arif, that are continually bringing up and considering this idea of Carson Wentz basically Case Keenuming his way through the rest of this season and just winning the job. I've argued pretty hard against it. I'm going to let that argument sort of sit and marinate. I have a whole Patreon video about it that's an hour long about Wentz's Eagles game, and there's a 2-hour one that's free to watch that you can watch right now about the Browns and Steelers games. So that's in-depth breakdowns of the last 3 games of Wentz. If you want to go see what I feel about that in a lot more detail, you can do that. But suffice to say, if we're just forgetting my opinion on it, I'm just a podcaster, who cares, right? Forgetting my opinion on it, it doesn't sound like the Vikings are going with Wentz. It sounds like Kevin O'Connell is, well, McCarthy could have come back this week if blah, blah, blah. He could have come back this week if blah, blah, blah. He could have come back that week if blah, blah, blah. He's not naming a starter because he never says that crap, because he just doesn't, right? What if 5 touchdowns and 500 yards this week from Carson Wentz? What if he just like clicks it into gear and something happens and now he's on his Daniel Jones redemption arc? Like, that could happen. That's not why would you say something in the media that makes you look like the fool if that happens? Why would you put yourself in that situation when you could just as easily say nothing? Idiot podcasters like me speculate a whole bunch, and at the end of the day, it doesn't matter when you trot JJ McCarthy back out there. Everyone shuts up and nobody really thinks about it again. The other point I wanted to address there was the idea of the Viking, there being some conspiracy. And if you're not inundated in social media, you may have no idea what I'm talking about. And bless you. All right. Just skip a couple minutes here. Okay. Go to the Zoever under. But if you're curious to what I'm talking about, there is a percolating conspiracy theory that the Vikings are essentially overplaying the high ankle sprain to softly bench JJ McCarthy, to essentially say that Atlanta game was such a disaster, you weren't ready. We're going to quote unquote high ankle sprain, put you as the emergency third, but really you're going to kind of go do more developing behind the scenes and getting ready, and we're going to kind of wait on you a little bit. This is probably the stupidest version of this I've ever seen. I think if you genuinely believe this, I have beachfront property in Idaho to sell you. Oh my God. I think if you genuinely believe this, I have oceanfront property in Idaho to sell you. But to entertain the idea, it's like that, and it's just an ankle sprain. It should be a 2-week injury. And we were told at the beginning it was a 2-week injury, and now it's 4, now it's 6. And that they basically just keep trying to buy him time. And part of this too is the prediction that O'Connell's going to come onto the podium on Monday after the Thursday night game and then be like, he's still not ready, guys. We're going to have to go with Wentz for 2 more weeks. And then soon enough, it's going to be Christmas and JJ McCarthy still isn't playing and he'll miss his whole second season. And we're going to just be going, well, we all have to wait and see more about him. And it's going to be year 3 before we see him at all. Or that they're going to like trade him at the deadline or something like that, because they're just so disillusioned with him and it's Josh Rosen. There's a couple things here. One, we have a lot of evidence that the high ankle sprain is real. I don't think you need to gather that. I think if you're going to accuse an NFL team of making up injuries, lying on their injury report, an offense that could cost them draft picks if caught, get Pablo Torre on it then. The burden of proof is on you. And you don't get to prove it by saying, well, he said something that sounds kind of weird to me if I already believe this and I'm looking to justify it. No, I need the hard proof. I need a video of JJ McCarthy walking around without and his, or I need a report from a Pablo Torre that's an internal memo that's titled, JJ McCarthy injury lie. I need hard evidence here. The burden of proof is on you. Me, I will go with what has been put on the injury report, what's been reported by everybody who's remotely reputable in this situation, which is that while there was optimism, and it's difficult to ascertain how high ankle sprains develop over their life, 4 to 6 is a very reasonable range for high ankle sprains. And this is the part that I think people maybe just don't know. But a high ankle sprain being a 6-week injury is like right in the middle of the bell curve. Some people come back after 2 weeks of a high ankle sprain. They're playing through pain. And it kind of depends on the guy, right? If it's Josh Allen, Josh Allen on a bad ankle is still going to be that much better than Mitch Trubisky. We're going to do it. JJ McCarthy on a bad ankle, who's still trying to develop and learn, and we don't want to stunt his growth by making him do a bunch of development on a bad ankle, develop a bad footwork habit. Now that's there. And O'Connell has talked about kind of making sure that when he has to make a little pocket movement, when he gets to the top of his drop, when he's driving into a throw, that he's doing that without pain. So his body isn't learning to compensate for that pain, because once the ankle is fully healed, those habits will stay and you'll have to break them. And that's bad for his long-term development. That's what they're trying to make sure he's 1,000,000% healthy with. But I want to say it was last year or maybe the year before when Lamar Jackson missed like 8 games with a high ankle. And I mean, quarterbacks missing games with a high ankle, missing 4 to 8 games with a high ankle sprain is super normal. So I think for the conspiracy to make sense, it has to not be a normal timeline. It's like watching Christmas come on December 25th and being like, something's fishy here. Why'd they put it on December 25th? Like, that's what it always is. What are you talking about? But anyways, I just don't really believe that there's anything afoul here. I think he's got a high ankle sprain and he's going to come back. And I think it's funny if you completely ignore the podium, because Kevin O'Connell always says unnecessarily cagey things on it. I kind of think he's just an idiot on the podium. I think he just doesn't really have a great sense for what when he has to be specific and direct and when he's allowed to be cagey. And so it causes all this weird stuff. But if you just like never listened to a press conference and you saw a quarterback visibly sustain a high ankle, I could go show you on the tape where it happened, and it sure looks like an ankle sprain. Get taped up on the sideline. That was on the camera. Be spotted in a walking boot the day after. If you just saw all that and then we're like, yeah, and then he missed 6 weeks, nobody would say anything, right? Everybody would be like, oh, okay, yeah, that probably makes sense. Bummer. Yeah, kind of wish he got some reps before that. That's a bummer. Like, that would be that. But for some gosh darn reason, everything's got to be a conspiracy. Anyways, one of the big questions that I got last episode in the mailbag was about the defense and why things broke down. I want to give you that next, plus the Zoever under, your bold predictions. Lots to do here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to find last-minute tickets. And it is kind of last minute if you were trying to get to this Vikings-Chargers game in SoFi. I will be there. I got my tickets a long time ago, but I kind of should have waited. Like, getting these last minute is actually like pretty clutch. Right now, you could get in the door for a group of 4 for $36 a ticket. No, $33 a ticket. Oh my gosh, there's a new one. This changes a lot. So if you're checking when you do it, maybe it might even be less for you, or more or whatever. But as I'm looking at it right now, $33 a ticket is right. I'm going to get right there because some people don't believe that I'm telling the truth. $33 a ticket is what you're getting there. So that's the kind of power of Gametime. It's faster, it's cheaper, it's way less stressful than any other way to buy tickets. And it's super simple. I can click on that for people. That's, by the way, all fees included. No hidden nonsense. It's not going to spike at the end. If I wanted to buy 4 of those tickets, it's 33 times 4, and that is that. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. Moving along with the Locked On Vikings podcast. If you would like to see my Carson Wentz stuff, if you would like to see a little bit of video evidence of what I'm about to talk about with Isaiah Rodgers, you can go check it out at patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. So what happened to the defense? That's a big question, right? And there's kind of a flawed premise there, because did the defense have that bad of a game is a super valid question. And I believe it was in the hot takes yesterday, was like that the defense didn't do that bad, right? They got a stop on 6 of their 9 drives. That's pretty good. And they had a really good success rate. It's just they gave up a bunch of explosives that were sort of a few outlier plays that weigh the rest of the game down. It's a little bit, how else was the play besides that Mrs. Lincoln? But it's probably worth examining those explosive plays to see if there is anything that is like super exploitable or unfixable that the Vikings have a problem with. And it speaks to a broader trend of the season, which is the Vikings overthinking things. They have repeatedly shot themselves in the foot, and I don't mean in a penalty way. I mean in a broad scope, game plan, personnel usage, coaching way. The Vikings have shot themselves in the foot a whole bunch this year, and there were a few examples of this one. But I'm talking about like trading Harrison Phillips away, trading Mekhi Blackman away, weird stuff on the depth chart, starting Blake Brandel, and they shouldn't have. And one of the things that they did in this game was because they were so worried about the run game, and Saquon Barkley and their run defense was struggling, they essentially went 3 or 4 D tackles like 2/3 of the game. They stayed in that big giant personnel. Sometimes they were responding to 6 O-line, right? So they put in all their guys. But what that meant was with somebody like Ivan Pace or Dallas Turner off the field, this was the 72-yard touchdown with Devonta Smith, which is, I think, the perfect example to illustrate these ideas because kind of everything happened that was a theme of the game. Isaiah Rodgers got beat, a blitz didn't get home, and the personnel was wrong. The personnel on a play action deep shot on 2nd and 5 against 6 O-line was up front. They sent 6 players on a blitz. Those 6 were Eric Wilson and Blake Cashman, both rushing off the edge, Jonathan Grenard inside Blake Cashman, and the other 3 were Jalen Redmond, Jonathan Allen, and Levi Drake Rodriguez. That is run personnel. That's 2 linebackers, 3 D tackles, and Jonathan Grenard rushing against Landon Dickerson, who is, in my opinion, the best guard in the league. Nobody won their matchup. Nobody got home. And now you're caught in a terrible situation. So, look, I get a lot of pass rushes that are designed for specifically Grenard to have a one-on-one opportunity. But when you are sending 6, you basically can't lose that rep if you're Jonathan Grenard. And even Myles Garrett loses reps. TJ Watt loses reps. All the greats lose reps. Jonathan Grenard loses reps as well. Danielle Hunter lost reps. Everson Griffin lost reps. Alan Page lost reps. Everybody, defensive linemen win 10 reps a game and you're a Hall of Famer. So bringing in your game plan and making it so we're going to send 6 and really there's only one guy we can reasonably expect to win because otherwise you're hoping Eric Wilson beats a tackle because everybody got an O-lineman. They had 6 O-linemen and they had running back help, right? Jalen Redmond actually did win his rep, but the running back was able to help. Essentially puts you in a really high likelihood situation to have time in the pocket against 5 in coverage, which is a death sentence, no matter who you are. I am not going to say this to absolve Isaiah Rodgers fully. He did have a bad rep and he gave up a big long touchdown. He needs, if he's going to be in the deep safety, basically deep half player in cover 2, you have to stay on top of your guy no matter what. Letting him get behind you is an unforgivable, is the cardinal sin of cover 2, no matter what kind of cover 2 it is, whether it's hot cover 2 with only 3 underneath, Tampa 2, classic 2, whatever, right? Never let the guy behind you. But when you only have 3 players underneath, because this is hot coverage, this is 2 deep, 3 underneath. The guy covering the flat doesn't have all that much. He's coming from really far inside, and it was Harrison Smith. So he's chugging, trying to get all the way to the sideline to cover underneath what Devonta Smith did a great job to sell as a blaze out. It looked like he was stemming to the inside, breaking to the outside for an out route. And Harrison Smith was trying to get underneath it and wasn't there. That's why Isaiah Rodgers bit. And here's what I'm going to say. I think if that were thrown, Harrison Smith was close enough to make a play on it. And I don't think Isaiah Rodgers had to bite. But I have to think that was kind of what he was thinking. Or he was just kind of taking the cheese in a situation where he didn't have to. But he did have enough underneath help and played as though he didn't have underneath help. So you explain that however you want to explain that. That's the core of the mistake. All it took was one step to the wrong way. And then Devonta Smith leans it back inside and he's beaten. It's over. And then it's just a foot race to the end zone. The throw had to be beautiful down the field, by the way. And that was the other thing is like Jalen Hurts made a lot of plays where they lost contain on him and then he scrambles out and he makes a good one on a scramble drill. And you're like kind of mad at nobody about it. That is okay. You can absolutely just look at some of those plays, tip your cap to Jalen Hurts and say, I'm not really worried about other guys doing that to us. But the plays like that one, the plays like sending a big bad blitz of 7 people, but again, one's Eric Wilson, one's Blake Cashman. They're not winning their reps. There's 3 D tackles on the field. And you're not sending your best pass rushers. It's almost like they were so scared of the run game because of what had happened in the last 2. They were so overcorrecting to that run game problem that they forgot to pressure one of the better quarterbacks in the league. And that to me is the unforgivable mistake. You cannot let a loss in Dublin where Kenneth Gainwell has a career day. You can't let that happen. But you sure as heck can't let that turn into a game plan mistake 2 weeks later that costs you another game. That's spiraling. That is overcorrecting, and it is a sign that even after a bye and a self-scout, they've completely lost the plot on how this team is supposed to play. They've abandoned what they thought they were, and now they're trying to find something on the fly that they aren't anymore. And so what they need to do, and maybe another mini bye is just as much time as they need to do it, but I don't really trust them not to overthink with all that time. Maybe a short week is good for them because they don't have time to overthink. They're just going to have to practice stuff that they know they're good at, go out and execute it. And that is when the Vikings are at their best. When they're playing their staples, when they're just putting the onus on the other team. This is what we do, you stop it. If you can't stop it, congratulations, right? You've put us in a really bad spot, but you kind of have to make that step happen before you start subverting. And with everything from Kevin O'Connell's calling too many double moves, from Brian Flores doing this weird stuff where he puts out 9 D tackles and nobody can rush the passer, from trading away Harrison Phillips and benching Ivan Payson and having nobody who's good at the blitzes. All of these baffling personnel moves that have happened, all of this stuff is so overthought. They aren't doing what they're good at. They're subverting what they're good at because they're so worried that the other team expects it. Oh, we're really good at this concept. The other team's going to be ready to defend this concept. Let's do a double move that looks like that concept. And that works sometimes, but they've leaned so far into that they're not running the basics anymore. They're not doing what they're good at anymore. They're not just executing their plan. So what I would like to see going into this Chargers game is for them to just do that. Do what you are good at. Speaking mostly on defense. When McCarthy is back against the Lions, then I would like to see them, run more of their stable, true pure progression reads rather than trying to set everything up for Carson Wentz's brain. But mostly on defense. Do what you are good at. Line up in cover 0 and go blitz, right? Play that off man. Play those sim pressures. Go play Tampa 2, right? Play your quarters the way you'd like to play it with that palms. Do what you do and force the Chargers to beat it. And even if you lose that game against the Chargers, I think you can hold your head high just knowing that you reestablished your identity. But the Vikings are a defense without an identity right now. After this Eagles game. That's really what happened. And offensively, they're way further from an identity. That's kind of a mess in a bunch of ways. So here's what we got next. We've got bold predictions. I've got a little bit of a controversy that we have to discuss. And of course, the Zoever under. So that'll all be next on Locked On Vikings.
I'm Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos, and this episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. This is Peloton's most advanced equipment yet, giving you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or you're cross-training with your favorite instructors like Alex Toussaint. It's training reimagined to make your workout more personal. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with features that help you plan, stay motivated, and hit peak performance. You can let yourself run, lift, flex, and go while Peloton handles all the rest. Plus, Peloton IQ provides real-time strength coaching, tracking your progress and suggesting weights that challenge you so you can get stronger. Plus, the new movement tracking camera, it counts your reps and corrects your form in real time, making sure every rep is safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now on FanDuel, the Vikings are 3-point underdogs on the road against the Los Angeles Chargers, but you can, of course, go check out a whole bunch of other things that we usually go over on the Zoever under, but because of the short week, haven't read you as many FanDuel lines as you think. However, I'll give you at least this, that the Justin Jefferson receiving line is at 80.5. Jordan Addison's is at 54.5. Carson Wentz's is at 222.5. If any of those sound interesting to you or anything else from this game or whatever, it is a great time to get involved with FanDuel. New customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if you hit, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Doesn't have to be a Vikings bet, and it doesn't even have to be that risky of a bet. You can go get the Bills money line against the Panthers, minus 370. And assuming that the Bills win that game, you would get $300 in bonus bets no matter how short those odds are. So go check it out at FanDuel.com to download, or you can download the FanDuel app today and get started. We do have your bold predictions coming up, but first, a real quick Zoever under. Chargers favored by 3, and the market is slamming it. Minus 120 on that. The over-under is 44.5 for all of the rest of the player props. You can go check that out at FanDuel. But, of course, my rabbits have to pick the game. For those of you who are new here, I always have my rabbits pick the game. I've been doing this for 4 years, and Zoe is insanely good at this. She's 5-1 this year. She went 12-4 another year. She's always been over 500 on the year. It is wild how good she is at picking these games, considering that it is basically random. So here we go. I put the lettuce down in front of Zoe, and she immediately ran up to the Vikings side at Vikings +3. However, Ziti chased her away. So what we have to do is slow it down and see if Zoe indeed did pick up a piece of lettuce. And if you slow it down frame by frame, you see she did get some. So both of the rabbits do end up picking the Vikings +3 in this game. Let's move on to your bold predictions. And firstly, we have to talk about the bold predictions from the Eagles game, and we did have one that arguably hit. We have to talk it out. But first, the ones that didn't. Somebody said J.J. McCarthy would be over 343 passing in this game. We didn't get any from that guy in this one. It was submitted before we knew McCarthy would be out. Jacob Moore said that Philadelphia would have over 200 rushing yards, but under 200 passing yards. Perhaps that fear led the Vikings to make some bad decisions. Ice Cold Bud Grant said that there would be a Harrison Smith turnover somehow involving Lane Jackson. We had one about a scoregami. 22-28 is not scoregami. Tim Pete said this will be the Jeff Okudah game. And Louis DiBiase also said that this would be the Josh Uche game. I would have maybe considered that if it was Jalix Hunt because he got the pick 6, but I don't think we could get either of those. Somebody said that Carson Wentz would be would have more than double Jalen Hurts' rushing and passing yards. We obviously didn't get that. Jalen Hurts gashed. And Milo Grams actually had one. We will see at least 2 40-yard touchdowns in this game, one from each team. Unfortunately, there was only one touchdown from the Vikings, and it sure as heck was not 40 yards. However, the streak Milo Grams was talking about, that like the team that scores a 40-yard touchdown always wins the game, did continue. So that streak is still alive. The one we got to talk about is from PFF's random number generator, who said it was an anti-revenge game. So no players playing against their former team would register a sack, interception, or touchdown. And I expanded that to include any big plays or moments. So we got to talk about Isaiah Rodgers. Javon Hargrave, total no-show, 18 reps. I think he got 1 tackle. Marcus Epps didn't play. Carson Wentz, terrible game, obviously. Didn't throw for any touchdowns or big giant play. He had 1 big-time throw, right? So you could say that the idea was that they would get no big plays, and Carson Wentz had 1 big-time throw, and that disqualifies it. You could also say that Isaiah Rodgers got 1 really good pass breakup on Devonta Smith, and got, I believe, a tackle for loss or for very little gain on a swing pass that could disqualify this. So I agonized about whether I would count this, because I did go into Friday's show and I said, like, we'll figure it out if it's close, and it's close with these two. But here's where what I keep coming back to is I said it would honor the spirit of the anti-revenge game. And if you were to come up with a scapegoat on either side of the ball, the guy that's getting the most negative press on either side of the ball, it's probably the 2 former Eagles, Isaiah Rodgers and Carson Wentz. So PFF's random number generator, congratulations, I am giving this to you. I don't know who you are. I don't know if you're a person who's been submitting questions or not, but please reach out to me, lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com, or leave a YouTube comment, or reach out to me on Discord if you have Discord or whatever. Like, reach out to me in whatever way you know how, Blue Sky, whatever, and send me an email address so we can get in touch, so I can get your charity for $20 and I can send you a gift link for 3 months of Discord. Let's move on to the Eagles. That brings us up, by the way, to 4 on the year, which is what I wanted. I didn't want them be hitting 3 of these a game, but I did want to hit 1 every once in a while. We got 4 on the year with 6 games. Let's go to this week's. The first one comes from a North Dakota Bison fan who says Carson Wentz is going to light up the Chargers in a blowout win and be named the starter for the rest of the year. You did put stats, but I am just going to give you the vagueness of it. I don't need him to hit the 400 yards and 2 touchdowns you said specifically. If he lights up the Chargers, if it's a crazy win and Carson Wentz wins the job, I'm giving this to you. Considering that the Vikings are pretty clearly not in that space right now. They are looking for when JJ McCarthy can return to the lineup, not when JJ McCarthy can return to second on the depth chart. That is not the context of most of the quotes we've gotten from Kevin O'Connell. So this game would have to change Kevin O'Connell's mind, and it would have to be pretty substantially good to do so. So I think we can kind of take it as its own litmus test without stats. Bro Knows Football says that his bold prediction is that Wentz does not finish the game on Thursday. A bunch of people put in some version of this. I will add to this. Bro Knows Football said some version of this, but I will add that Max Brosmer outplays him. I'm not going to, again, I'm going to be very vague and nebulous about this, but that Max Brosmer has to clearly outplay him. It shouldn't be debatable at all. I'll even add it. I'm typing it out right now. Max Brosmer clearly outplays him in the rest of the game. So whether Wentz goes down for injury or benching, Max Brosmer still has to play really well, has to not look like a downgrade in any, everybody has to be like, yeah, Max Brosmer was definitely better. Sam Huseby says, akin to the last time the Chargers and Vikings met, and Caleb Evans had a touchdown pass go through his hands. God, you remember that? Through his hands, tipped up and turned into a touchdown. And I think they lost that game by 2. There will be an offensive touchdown that touches 5 different pairs of hands, including the quarterback and center. So thinking that through, quarterback, center, receiver would be the normal, right? So we need 2 different hands for it to touch. It could bounce around. This could be a flea flicker situation. I will say it just needs to touch hands. So a fingertip on the ball, I will count here and give this to you. But obviously that's a tough one. He also said that it would be Josh Palmer because he's number 5. I'm removing that part. I think the 5 different hands is already tough enough because that means just a tip touchdown isn't enough. You need 2 different extra people that usually wouldn't touch the ball to touch the ball. Arch, like Manning, but good. I haven't watched Arch Manning once. Is he really that bad, y'all? Because I thought he was like the guy you were tanking for. Or should we never do that? Maybe ever. And maybe we should never take for granted that the quarterbacks are good and tanking is for losers. Says that the Chargers will be wearing their 1988 to 1999 throwbacks, and the Chargers coach played in the 1999 matchup between these 2 teams. We would see a similar stat line from our QBs. So Jeff George had 350, 4 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. I will say Carson Wentz needs to match that, or Vikings quarterbacks, if it does turn into Carson Wentz getting benched like the other guy said. And then Harbaugh had 400 with 1 touchdown and 1 interception. So we need a 4 touchdown, 3. We need a Nick Mullins game, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, bunch of yards. And then Harbaugh with just a really efficient game, but not necessarily throwing all the touchdowns. Ontario Smith says, that Jets triples his season touchdown total. So he only has 1 touchdown on the year. He scored week 1 and he hasn't actually hit pay dirt since. This happens with Jefferson. I think he gets doubled a lot in the red zone and the Vikings find other ways to score touchdowns. Or in the case of this year, their offense just kind of stinks and they don't get a lot of scores. They were good in the red zone up until that last game, but obviously, the last game is the only one that happened in a lot of your brains. So none of you are going to get mad at me. So that means 3 touchdowns for Justin Jefferson. Magic says that the Vikings and Chargers are spiritually linked in many ways with such things like kicking woes. My bold prediction is that Cameron Dicker will set the record for the longest kick in NFL history, only for our boy Will the Thrill to re-break the record on a game-winning field goal. I will say I do not need the field goal to be game winning. But I will say Cameron Dicker breaking the record and then Will the Thrill breaking that record would be an incredibly Vikings-Chargers thing. Sometimes with these like super, super cursed teams, they all get together and the game turns out to be like super normal. It's like a 21-24 ending and maybe it was exciting a little bit at the end, but like these super cursed teams like cancel each other out, or it's a game that's supposed to be so cursed that it loops all the way back around, like Gandhi in the original Civilization game. Those who know. Last one here comes from Milo Grams, who says, this week has an odd quirk from 2019. In 2019, the Vikings should have lost to the Chargers. As you may recall, that was the notorious long missing 3-score win for the Vikings, right after they went almost 5 full seasons without one. Right after which they went almost 5 full seasons without one. Not until week 1 of 2024 when, what was that game? Was that against the Giants? Yeah, the Century Reds. Anyways, why should the Vikings have lost that game, you ask? Well, going back to the beginning of time, the Vikings and Chargers alternate who wins every single game. If that 2019 game was flipped, that streak would still be alive today, but of course it didn't. So instead, the Vikings have a 3-game win streak among win-loss, win-loss, win-loss. So the bold prediction is that both teams honor this legend by alternating the quarters in which they score points. So one team scores in the first and the other one gets blanked. Then that team scores in the second and the first team gets blanked, and so on and so forth. That means the Vikings only scored in the first and third quarters or only in the second and fourth quarters, and the Chargers get vice versa. Only one team scores per quarter. That is a ridiculously bold prediction. If you were to like parlay that on FanDuel, the odds would be out of this world. So a very good bold prediction. What a wild streak. You were very deep, Milo. Love it. We will be back tomorrow for the crossover with Locked On Chargers. I'll see y'all for that. And as always, Skol.